My Wife's Movie Club watched McLintock, the 1963 Western starring John Wayne as George Washington or G.W. McLintock, and Maureen O'Hara as Catherine McLintock, his estranged wife. This is part 2 of my review. In this part, I will attempt to cover the McLintock morality and various other lessons from the film. McLintock is different from a lot of Westerns. There is no villain, no dressed in black bad guy who needs to be dealt with, but there are plenty of conflicts. The first and foremost is the angry, bitter wife who won't explain why she's mad, but treats everyone like scum, verbally abusing them, abandoning her husband for 2 years, being untrue, flirting with others, dancing with other men, while her husband lives alone. Secondly, we have some overly protective brothers, uncles, and strange sense of honor that looks like everyone is looking for a fight. We have some offenses taken, misunderstandings left without inquiry, people jumping to conclusions, unjust accusations, and a near lynching. How does the Wild West address such behaviors? Well, if you believe the film, it's not lawsuits or police action. It's through fighting and spanking. For the men, it's fighting. It seems like when you are offended in the West, you must discredit it through fighting. If winning the fight is required, I suppose that means might is right, but I'm not sure it is. Dev sees a fight between two men. He thinks the fight is not fair and unjust, so he fights the man who started the fight, who is bigger than the other one. What is happening here? Well, it seems like the fight is a way of saying to someone, you're wrong and need correction. The fight is supposed to teach a lesson, the temporary pain and defeat to anchor that learning. It is like a grown-up version of the spank. And everyone has a different threshold. They don't agree on what offenses require action. Dev, after his intervention in the fight, is challenged by the uncle of the man who he fought. He is much stronger than Dev, and the offense is only that he has bested his nephew. GW and Dev in turn try to teach him a lesson, but the system's not perfect. But this type of fighting ends with shaking hands, not a morgue or a hospital. These are not duels. For women, well, you can't rightly hit them, so what is left? In this film, spanking. It seems archaic and inappropriate because that is what you do to, with disobedient children. But if they're going to act like children, then why not treat them that way? A good spanking never did permanent damage. It gets the point across, and it's humiliating enough that someone might actually think twice before behaving so awful again. Well, the problem is we just don't think that way anymore. There are no fights that don't end in serious injury anymore, and society has agreed that a woman can act as bad as they want and still never deserve to be spanked. Our society traded the intervention kick in the pants for indifference, ignoring, and escalation to the point that prison is where everybody ends up. This is where the film establishes a difference between the East, civilized but morally bankrupt society, and the West, uncivilized but honest society. The West is depicted as hardworking, independent thinkers who fend for themselves. Not always the smartest, but they'd solve their problems on their own. You would never see a woman spanked in the East, but here in the West, that's a different story. Becky is an example of this. She tells her father, without listening to reason, without stopping to understand, she tells him to...
He said it again! Shoot him!
Now, hold on.
No, don't hold on. If you're my father, if you love me, you'll shoot him.
Well?
It comes across as the words of a spoiled, petulant child. She gets her wish, and she sees she was begging and demanding something she really did not want. How do you convert this small moment of contrast into a long-term learning? A good old-fashioned spank. Not with the hand, mind you. That can do damage. Someone could get hurt, so let's use a coal shovel or a belt.
How long, GW?
How long what?
Catherine.
She's been riding herd on you for 2 years now.
I'm a peaceable man. But my father used to say, you raise your voice, it doesn't do any good. It's time to raise your hand.
Catherine, or Kate, has been on her tantrum for 2 years. She has demanded a divorce and that her daughter come with her as she moves permanently to the east. And on top of it all, she hasn't told GW the reason why.
You are going to tell me why you packed up, picked up, and walked out on me.
It is not until the very end of the film that we learn her reason, and even then she runs away, causing herself more harm than good. She has been acting childish and churlish to the whole town. Her punishment is a public spanking in front of the town, as if it were an apology to the town that she disparaged. Katie is also tarred and feathered prior to her spanking. Even in a civilized society, this was a public torture or punishment. Her version is with molasses and feathers, so there's no burning and blistering and peeling off of the skin. That doesn't exist, as it would for many men who were tarred and feathered. Just like the fist is wrong for women, the actual tar and feathers is not right for them either. However, the metaphor is still relevant to a severe public criticism, and in this case it's kind of done in a humorous way. No one does this to her, it's kind of self-done. It's her location and her action. A couple more thoughts. Why do some things bother us and others don't? How come some events change our world and others don't? First, it depends on who's making the decision in your life. Is it you or someone else or something else? Second, if it's you, then it will depend on how you were personally impacted. In the film, there's a shooting of several weapons on the main street and everyone has to shelter to avoid being hit by stray bullets. However, the response, possibly because no one was hurt, is not despair or fear, but instead we hear from the crowd, "Doggone it, folks, don't let a little old raid break up a good barbecue and a rodeo." This is expression or a tendency to adapt or return to a stable level of living regardless of what has just happened to us. The sheriff and politicians could have closed down the town, locked everybody up, but all that would do is increase and prolong the terror of the event. Growth and education should be the goal when something frightening happens, but if you live in fear and despair, you have already locked yourself up. Life is not about simple answers, handouts, being wealthy or poor, or overreacting to yours and other people's problems. Only children think there are simple answers. They judge without all the facts. Life is hard. You will be misunderstood. People will try to take away your liberty. Governments will be against individual rights. Biases will exist against you personally. But through it all, don't settle for the childish answers. Struggle until you find the full story and withhold judgment until then.
Because all the gold in the United States Treasury and all the harp music in heaven can't equal what happens between a man and a woman with all that growing together. I can't explain it any better than that.
This growing together means you might get spanked a couple times. And if you allow yourself to change for the better, the sting of the spank will be but for a small moment. McLintock is a fun Western. I think I liked it most for the culture shock it caused me. The dialogue was well written, the characters were fascinating. There is a lot in this movie worth talking about. I didn't talk about a lot of things such as the dangers of group identity, the questions surrounding Catherine's proposed reason for divorce, was he guilty, why GW grants a divorce at the end, etc. Anyway, I laughed a lot and I had a great time watching this movie with my wife. I would recommend this film to anyone. Thanks for watching.
It's sad, these changing times.
It isn't the times that are changing, Mama.